Okay, let's just take this one thing at a time. We'll do it by the numbers. And that is George Lucas, good director or bad director with any movie. Well, let's look at the prequels. Look at the choices. Here's a case where George Lucas had everything he wanted. He had total control. He had all the power. He made all the decisions, final cuts, even in the editing room. He decided what shots had which special effects and how much and where and why and when. Written and directed by, executive produced by George Lucas. Star Wars, the prequels. Now, is George Lucas a good director? Does he make movies that are, by some metric or any metric, bad or good? Yes, sure. You could say by any book, by definition, depending on which book, whose definition, which starting point, where you started at. Yeah, George Lucas is a good director, or a great director, or a bad director, ham-fisted or whatever. But what you can't say is that George Lucas doesn't direct. George Lucas is a director, and George Lucas directed the prequels in the way he wanted them to be. George Lucas is the creator. George Lucas is the master of this universe, so to speak. This universe of Star Wars, episodes 1 through 6, and episodes 1 through 6, including the prequels, episodes 1 through 3. And then, of course, this is the Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. And the prequels, of course, tell the story of the beginning of Anakin Skywalker, and of Anakin Skywalker's family and his life growing up as a slave in the world that he grew up in, and then the world of the Republic. And this is the world of Star Wars, but it's the world of the universe in which these characters live. We see and we meet Obi-Wan Kenobi, who is the student at this time in this world, and we meet the master and the teacher, a Jedi, Qui-Gon Jinn. And the prequels show us the Republic and the order of the Jedi and the culture of the Jedi and the society of the people, the political system of the day in which our characters lived and thrived, and then how they were where they were and what happened in this world in episode 4. And then we see through 5 and 6. And then this will be New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, The Empire Strikes Back, and then Return of the Jedi. And these are the principal, primary movies that we look at when we ask, is George Lucas a good director? Or is George Lucas a bad director? One, as we said, one thing you cannot deny, no one can deny, it's a fact. George Lucas is a director. He's a director. And then by any metric or whatever standard you use, however you're going to measure it, whatever definition, what's your starting point, what is your dictionary, then you can then say, well, according to this, George Lucas is this or that. But as to whether or not George Lucas made the movie and the movies that he wanted to make, I think we would all agree that the movies that he wanted to make are episodes 1 through 3. And the movies that he did make, mostly, according to his vision, mostly episodes 4 through 6. And this is the question that we're going to look at and see. And we see the prequels. Is George Lucas a good director? Well, how well did he tell his story? Let's look at it by any, as we said, any metric, any standard, anything, any definition you want to use. Just look up the word quality. Let me ask you, is it the quality picture George Lucas is writing? Is George Lucas telling us a story that is of some high resolution and deep and tactile texture and of interesting pull and draw? Are we interested in staying in this world? Do we want to live and see this world more? Might we even want to live through one of these characters that we see? The cinematography, the lighting, the special effects. And here again we see, and we note this, that George Lucas is a director that does often create and invent special effects, ways to shoot using cameras and computers, even mechanical, all kinds of mechanical devices. Anything you can imagine, he will assemble a team as he needs to accomplish his goal, which is to tell a story. And in the prequels, he had a lot more options for special effects and so on. And then I know there's a lot of people out there that wanted to see this was a puppet, or they wanted to have, they needed more little puppets, and they wanted more claymation, and whatever. Miniature sets, practical sets, whatever. But what they will look at that when they see the prequels, and they'll say, well, they too many special effects, too much green screen, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, whatever. Take a look at the originals. Man, they used so much stuff in that was ahead of its time. But yet, come on, man, really look at it. The special effects in the prequels are so much better. And not to mention, they're used absolutely perfectly to tell the story, to convey the power and the awesomeness of the weaponry they have. But not only that, the technology and the way they communicate. We draw from some of the holograms and the other types of transmissions that we see from the previous movies, and now we look back and we see these are still in operation, still in use. We see the predecessors to the X-Wing, so to speak. And then we also see these B-1 droids, the battle droids, and these are, of course, a more comical version of our stormtroopers that we had in episodes 4, 5, and 6. And then, of course, in the prequels, now we have one of the most interesting characters and one of the funniest characters we've ever had in any of these episodes. And in fact, the funniest, absolutely, by design, according to George, Jar Jar Binks. And say what you will about Jar Jar Binks, whether you love him or you hate him. This is George Lucas, full control. And I do believe, and I have said this, and I do go on record as saying this, I do believe that George Lucas has written into this particular character his own self into the story, and also any person that has ever wanted to join in any Star Wars movie or adventure and just jump right in and be part of it. And that's my opinion on it. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. But my opinion is that's what George has done. He's inserted a character through which any person can be in Star Wars that wants to. And so that's my opinion, and I'll be more than happy to explain it. You can read all about it in the books. I explain it all in the books. But these are deep concepts. The creator, the master creator, George, he has brought us these concepts and these truths. And we see these in the prequels developed through the relationship between the master and the teacher. And then we see the politics of the time in which they live, and the beginnings of the weaponry and the as we call them in episodes 4, 5, and 6, the Empire. But now here it's the Republic, and they have no army. And then Attack of the Clones, they of course then vote to create this grand army, which is actually an army of clones based on and created out of the DNA, so to speak, of Jango Fett, the bounty hunter. And then we meet Count Dooku, and we see another type of Jedi. This is the political idealist, and yet manipulator and liar, aspiring to be a Sith Lord, in my opinion, a very mysterious villain. And I think Dooku is one of George's greatest triumphs in cinema. And this is a character, as written, mysterious, intriguing, likable, and yet to be feared, or rather, empathized with, I should say, rather than likable. And so I want to congratulate George on that character as well. Lighting, music. We give all credit to John Williams on the music. Amazing score. Every movie got better. This is the greatest music in any Star Wars that's ever been produced, ever been created by any director ever. John Williams combined with George Lucas. But you got to give credit to George here for writing the stories in the first place. And as John will watch these movies and then arrange and write these pieces and these original scores, it's amazing. It's magnificent. These two individuals, these two men are just amazing creators, and they've done amazing work together. And they did amazing work together on the prequels. And George, so far we see a lot of amazing work done on the prequels. You can read all about it in the books, but just keeping over the top of it. Say what you will about George Lucas. How about the editing? Phantom Menace. Oh, granted, it's a bit choppy, and I will say it is all over the place with regard to tone, and also with regard to how the story is told from place to place. You'll be in one region, and then you'll be in another region, and then suddenly it's somewhat funny, and then you're jarred out of that seriousness into humorous to Jar Jar, and you've never seen any character of this nature before, where something very serious is happening, and then suddenly out of nowhere, it's straight out of Gilligan's Island, and we've never seen that before. Although, keep this in mind, although in the original trilogy, we did have R2-D2 and C-3PO, and I mean, come on, these two characters are straight out of Laurel and Hardy, seriously. So, right, Jar Jar Binks, absolutely, Gilligan's Island in space, sure, great, but look, man, Jar Jar is truly designed to be one of the funniest characters, and he's truly designed to be jarring and possibly annoying in certain cases. And I have my opinions as to why that is. As I said, read about it in the books. This is deep. The master, the creator, has given us a lot to think about. But whether to say this character's a bad character, come on, he's hilarious. Yeah, so maybe you didn't like him in this story, but George loved him. If you didn't think he was funny, somebody thought he was funny. There's a lot of people that think Jar Jar is funny. A lot of people love Jar Jar. So get over it. Get over yourself, man. And I don't want to make it personal. But come on, man. You're going to trash George over Jar Jar Binks. Jar Jar is one of the greatest characters ever created. Jar Jar is possibly more well-known than Coca-Cola. Come on, man. Everybody knows who Jar Jar is. Look, and all credit goes to those other ones, those other movie makers, and made all those other Disney movies and all that. You know, great. We all know those aren't real Star Wars movies. We all know those are fake. Great. Whatever, man. They did their best. They tried their best. They're fake. They're not even real. Whatever. Nobody cares about BB-8. Nobody cares about Rey. Nobody cares about any of these characters. Nobody cares. They'd rather read the books. They'd rather read the comics. And they'd rather watch the original trilogy. And they'd rather watch the prequel trilogy. And they'd rather watch the original holiday special. And they'd rather watch the original Clone Wars. Nobody cares about Disney, Star Wars movies. They don't care about episode 7, 8, and 9. Nobody cares about that. Nobody cares about it. They all paid money to go see it. And now they're done. They're done. Nobody cares about it. No, that's the difference between the real director like George Lucas and these other directors that masquerade possibly as directors, real directors or not. But man, they're directors, but come on. The quality of their Star Wars movies is not to the quality of Lucas movies. The quality of these directors' movies is not to the quality of the real master of this universe. It's just not the same. It's literally a fake Star Wars. And I'm not trashing the quality of the work as a technical quality or as effort put into it. And I'm not trashing anyone's intent to make a positive, uplifting movie that helps motivate people, entertain, as well as make some money, so they can keep making more of these. I'm not putting these people down for doing good work like that. I'm simply saying nobody cares about these movies as serious Star Wars movies because they're not. They're fake. Not as to whether or not they're trash. As I said, technically they're really good movies. But come on, man. Nobody cares about BB-8. Everybody loves Jar Jar Binks. Get over it. And I don't want to make it personal, but come on, man. Nobody cares about all these other people from these Disney movies. Nobody cares about nothing that Disney's doing. And George Lucas made these prequels absolutely, totally in control. He had every person around him saying, yes, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. And you saw it. I watched the tapes. You watched the tapes. It's him and Steven Spielberg. He was showing him pictures of these droids he was going to use. He had practical sets, practical effects. Ahmed Best walking around in a suit on the set all the time with the actors, everyone. Jake Lloyd. Come on, man, that kid deserves an Oscar for his portrayal of Anakin Skywalker in his movies. Directed beautifully, perfectly. Yeah, maybe you didn't like the way it was directed, but it was the way George wanted it, totally. Maybe you didn't like it the way George used his sound effects and where he put the special effects in, where he wanted to use green screen and CGI to tell the story. What is that? He's the director. You go make your own movie. Yeah, Disney made their own movies. How'd that work out? Yeah, we all know how those worked out. Look at it. Trash, man. And I'm not putting anybody down personally for putting in good work, but it's garbage. It's not real. Yeah, it's quality work in the sense of it being technically, it's done with technical care, and it's also done with heartfelt passion and with good intent. And that is not the part I'm trashing. What I'm saying is it's fake, and it's pretty much garbage. So if you want to watch it, I highly recommend that you just get it on Blu-ray and watch it at home or whatever. But I was able to watch all these movies in the theater, and let me tell you, it is not compared to a real Star Wars movie, a real Lucas movie. The prequels, you have the original trilogy, and then you have the prequels. The prequels is the realest Star Wars you're ever going to get. The prequels is the most pure, most Lucas, most Star Wars you'll ever get. And you have all the characters, you meet them all. As we said, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Qui-Gon Jinn, the teacher, C-3PO, R2-D2, Darth Sidious, a.k.a. the Emperor, Chancellor, a.k.a. Senator Palpatine, Padme Amidala, Anakin Skywalker as Michelle, Jabba the Hutt. We have so many references to the original trilogy, directorial choices in the writing, and it's how people enter a room, the framing of the picture. Just take a look, for instance, at Anakin Skywalker's house with his mom, Shmi Skywalker, and as they're coming home after the sandstorm starts kicking up after they've made the deal there at Watto's place to buy another classic character, Watto. Watto's an all-time classic character, man. This guy's straight out of Taxi. This guy's fantastic, Watto. I love him. He's one of the funniest characters and consequential characters in movie history. Very well played here. We got to get the name of the actor on that one, but a great job by Watto, by this actor playing Watto. And then he's the store owner that is also the owner of Anakin Skywalker and his mother, Anakin's mother, Shmi Skywalker, and he's their owner and their slaves. And they work for him here also at this parts store. It's a classic character. And so after the storm, here, and this is of course also when we meet Jar Jar, as he causes some problems there. Again, he's annoying and hilarious. And so Bulba, and then they go into the house there where Anakin lives, and they're shivering there, and as Anakin enters the door, you see him shiver. And it's such just a normal human moment. And I know for a fact, well, I'm 99% sure for a fact that George told him to come in the door and shiver like that. And if not, And if he did, and Jack, either way, in either case, whether Jake came up with that or George told him to do it and Jake did it, it's amazingly carried out and performed, filmed and caught on camera for the entire world to watch forever, as long as it's preserved. And I highly recommend you to watch that scene alone. Not to mention the rest of that scene as it's played out, as they all sit down for meal at the home there of Anakin Skywalker, Shmi Skywalker. And here we see his Padme Amidala, Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Jabba, Jar Jar Binks. And then, of course, we then R2-D2's there, and then we meet C-3PO. But it's such a beautiful human moment in this epic story of what is eventually going to be war and love and tragedy, and beautifully directed, beautifully told by George. Every actor did a great job. Again, I say Jake Lloyd deserves an Oscar for Anakin Skywalker in The Phantom Menace, written and directed by George Lucas, an all-time epic masterpiece. The Phantom Menace, written and directed by George Lucas, producer Rick McCallum, executive producer George Lucas, and an all-time epic masterpiece. All-time. The Phantom Menace, George Lucas. Fantastic job, great director, in my opinion. He's great at what he does. Hey, if you don't like it, make your own movies. Hey, you can trash George all you want. You can trash the prequels all you want, but it comes right down to it. Yeah, he made them, and they're beautifully made. They're what he wanted, and if you don't like them, great. If you don't like them to the point where you can't stand looking at them, super, stop looking at them. But to sit here and trash George personally, and trash his skills as a director. Hey, look, man, I'll tell you, J.J. Abrams is a director. But come on. I'm not even going to get into that. You can't, there's no comparison, man. Star Wars under George Lucas is all-time Star Wars. Star Wars under any other group or entity or mind or creator is simply not Star Wars, and that's all there is to it. That's just all there is to it. So, if George is the director, and we're grading George, and we're using the prequels to grade George on whether or not George is a good director or George is a bad director, is George a good writer or is George a bad writer? I would say George is a good director and George is a good writer. Whether or not you think he's a great director and a great writer, I wouldn't argue that yet. But I would argue that the prequels are great. And I would argue that everything in the prequels is great. And all of his directorial choices in the prequels were almost nearly perfect. The movies aren't perfect. The prequels aren't perfect. I grant you that. I know that. Of course, they're not perfect. And also, they're just movies, and it's all fake. None of it's real. The special effects are used to tell a story. And it's all about the stories. And if you don't tell a quality story, then you're missing the point as the director. And if you're not seeing the story because you didn't like the directorial choices, then great. I mean, hey man, that's your choice. And possibly that's the choice of the director, and maybe the director's turning off a lot of people that may potentially want to follow the art of that director's art, and whatever, man. George wants to make the kind of movies he's making. He made them. He made them 3 times, and then he made them 3 times for real this time. George Lucas changed the world twice. Man, I'm telling you, the prequels, nobody saw that coming. Well, a lot of people did. George possibly did. Is George Lucas a good director or a bad director in the prequels? I would say he's a good director. Are the prequels good? I would say the prequels are great. Are the prequels perfect? Of course not. Nothing's perfect. Nobody is perfect. Do the best you can. The prequels are great. The prequels are better than the original trilogy. the prequels make the original trilogy better. And yes, again, I'll say it, the prequels are better than the original trilogy. And the Star Wars prequels is the real Star Wars, the realist Star Wars. The OT is the real Star Wars. The prequels is the real Star Wars. The original Clone Wars, the original Clone Wars is the real Star Wars. And as far as I'm concerned, the holiday special is the real Star Wars, the original holiday special. But this is what we're looking at today, is George Lucas a good director in the prequels? Yes, I would say absolutely. And I would say even the amount of work and care and thought and intention and purpose and love and passion he put into blood and sweat and tears he put into these movies, yeah, I would say he shows himself to be a great director. And I'd say all of his directorial choices in this movie, every movie, especially The Phantom Menace. If you look at The Phantom Menace as an example of where George got everything he wanted, and the characters as he wanted them, everyone's placed perfectly. Everyone says just what he wants them to say. Like, you look at a character like Jar Jar Binks. His character, yes, he's silly, he's annoying, and he is Gilligan. But he's not dumb, he's not stupid. He's very intelligent, he's insightful, and he provides a lot of exposition through questions that he asks in intelligent ways, in a way that shows that he's thinking about these ideas and contending with all uncertainties as well as fears and possibly exuberant hopes, and he sees a new vision of seeing adventure, but he's scared. In many ways, he's like a kid, but he's a very intelligent character. He provides insight into the world of the every person in our time, in our mind, and in the world of that time. We meet the Gungans, and then we meet the Naboo, and these are the people that live on this planet, and then the amphibious creatures that live under the water on this planet. And we see two cultures meet each other and what this looks like, and through the eyes of this character, Jar Jar Binks, who's, oh yes, annoying, yes, jarring, funny, but also he's curious. He asks a lot of questions. It's the first time two cultures are meeting on this planet. Two people. Neither of them have a love for or liking for the other, and they fear the other in many ways. But now here they're finally meeting, one person on one another, meeting Jar Jar Binks and Padme Amidala. And then we know AKA Queen Amidala later. And then of course the whole trilogy, the prequel trilogy, is love. It's war and love and tragedy. But it's all about redemption. And it's a story of fathers and sons, and mothers and sons, and loves and lovers, and war and loss, and intrigue and manipulation and lies and backstabbing. But it is a story of deep meaning and of great importance to George. And then, of course, he sold it. And now it's in the hands of someone else, another group, or whatever. But this is not to lament the loss of George. No, what we're saying here is George, by any definition, is a good director. George in the prequels shows greatness. And I would dare say he's a great director. I will say that. In the prequels, George is a great director. Written, directed by George Lucas. The Phantom Menace. This is George Lucas, man. Everything he wanted. The characters written the way he wanted them. And all the stories that are told here. Episodes 1, 2, and 3. Tell one story, and that is the story of Anakin Skywalker. And how Anakin is in many ways an anomaly, but also based on many myths and and in some cases, legends, but myths, and these stories of one without a father, and the virgin birth, and so on and so forth. And George tells the story in a world that is sci-fi, yet very grounded in the reality where we live, where people work, and there's technology and mechanics, and yes, droids, robots, androids, politics. There's a lot of politics in the prequels. George puts this in the prequels on purpose. He is telling a story of a world that takes place in a world. He's telling a story of people within a world. And to show us this world, he immerses us into the politics of this world. And this is by his choice, by his design. Does this mean George is a bad director because he put a lot of politics in the prequels? Come on, man, no. That doesn't mean George is a bad director because he put a lot of politics in the prequels, which you may or may not have liked. I love the politics of the prequels. Does that mean I like bad dialogue? No. But I think the prequels are great. I say the prequels are better than the original trilogy, and I'd say the prequels make the original trilogy better. And George wanted a lot of politics in the prequels, so he put a lot of politics in the prequels. And we've got a lot. The opening title called The Phantom Menace starts with a dispatch, a secret mission by the Supreme Chancellor. And it's a blockade, trade disputes, taxation of trade routes. This is a lot of stuff to look at, read, politics, and blah, 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 blah. But to George, is he a bad director for introducing us to this world and creating the title crawl, the introductory remarks as he wanted them to be? Is he a bad director? Was there anything confusing about that? No. And all of that was very clear. George lays out the world in which we're about to be dropped, literally. Just dropped into each episode as he does. And interestingly, in episode 4, and these movies rhyme with many ways. You'll see the rhyming in these movies with the OT. And this is done brilliantly. You'll see this, and the more you watch it, just on a one-time watch through of any of the trilogies. If you watch the original trilogy first, as I did growing up, saw the original in the theaters. And I'll give away my age here. I was 10 years old when I saw that movie in 1977. And I'll leave it at that. But it was the greatest thing I ever saw, and that was the first time I ever wanted to be any person that I'd ever seen on a screen, before a movie screen. And of course that person was Han Solo. I wanted to be Han Solo. This was amazing. I've never seen anything like this before. It changed my life forever. And throughout the years I'd seen myself, imagined myself as different characters, and many of the characters in Star Wars, including Jar Jar Binks. I love Jar Jar. And when Jar Jar came along, I said, that is a character I could really sink my teeth into, man. I love that character. Jar Jar Binks is one of the funniest characters I've ever seen in Star Wars. I love this character. He's hilarious, man. But not only that, he's intelligent, and he introduces us to a new world, a new culture. This is an underwater world now. In the original trilogy, we saw the cloud city above the planet, and now we see the water below the planet, so to speak. It's above the planet, but it's below the land. It's the water world. Here are these amphibians. And Jar Jar Binks, an orange amphibian, with long ears. Hilarious, one of the funniest characters we've ever had. Finally, also, we've never had an orange amphibian in Star Wars before, with 8 long ears. Never had that. We finally have it now. He's hilarious, Jar Jar. Everybody loves him. Who doesn't love Jar Jar? Get with it, man. You got George Lucas, more brilliance. He shows his brilliance with these characters. They lead him to tell a story. And so, is George Lucas a bad director because he put a lot of politics in the prequels? Absolutely no. George is all the more displaying his greatness by putting the politics and laying it out in front, showing us this world, and then explaining it very clearly. George knows what he's doing. He did what he knows, and we got the result, The Phantom Menace. And it was great. And then we have, of course, Attack of the Clones. Not to mention, in The Phantom Menace, we were introduced to Anakin Skywalker as the pilot. And this, again, is brilliantly told. And then we see, to display both this and to give us something exciting to watch. And also the George's love of cars and car racing. We have the epic pod race, legendary. The pod race and the pod racing is now a part of the Star Wars universe. Brilliant. Another directorial choice I regard as great. Who doesn't love watching that scene over and over and over again? It's fantastic. Great job. George Lucas, all-time epic masterpiece. The Phantom Menace. Written and directed by George Lucas. Produced by Rick McCallum. Executive produced by George Lucas. The Phantom Menace, an all-time epic masterpiece. So yeah, so far we got George at 10 out of 10 in both the opening title crawl, which was very clear. Was it the title crawl you liked? Possibly, maybe no, maybe yes. Was it the title crawl you wanted? Maybe no, maybe yes. Was it the title crawl he thought he should have used? Yes. So, yeah, we got the one he wanted to use, and was it clear? Yes. Grammatically correct? Absolutely. Was it a bit clunky? Somewhat. But was I confused about any of it, and was I bored with any of it? No, absolutely not. It worked perfectly, and I think it was great. It tells the story. It told the story. It helped us with the story. It moved the story along. Great job, George Lucas. 10 out of 10. Next category. World building, writing, directing. How does George show us the politics of this world? Well, he shows us the politics of this world by showing us the actual political chamber of delegates and representatives and political backdeals and infightings and outfightings, calls for removal, vote of no approval, so to speak, war and politics, committees to validate the validity of these accusations. A lot of politics in the Phantom Menace. Very clearly shown. Was any of it boring? Was any of it clunky? Absolutely not. Again, it's all of your point of view. I think George did a great job at this. I think his work here is absolutely impeccable. Is it good for this telling of the story? May I rephrase that? Not impeccable. Perfectly chosen for this movie, I should say. He did not make these choices haphazardly. This is directed by George Lucas. This is written by George Lucas. This is executive produced by George Lucas. This is what George wanted. I love it. I loved it when I saw it in theaters. I loved it when I watched it. When I watched it on VHS, videotape, I loved it. When I watch it on DVD, I love it. When I stream it on the streaming service, I love it. I love it. When I listen to it, I love it. I love The Phantom Menace. I love everything about The Phantom Menace. I think George Lucas did a great job. 10 out of 10. I congratulate George. I congratulate Lucasfilm. I congratulate every person who was involved in making this movie. Not only a job well done, but on a story well told. And I mean that deeply from the bottom of my heart. This was a fantastic story of epic proportions that was told in a way that it is accessible by a 10-year-old, in my opinion. Not that it should be accessible by a 10-year-old, but that it could be accessible by a 10-year-old. And also an 8-year-old or a 6-year-old if you wanted to really get down to it. And also it's a beautiful movie to watch and easy to follow if you turn the sound down and you just look at the pictures. Beautiful and beautiful to watch. as well as beautifully told and masterfully directed for the telling of this story. I will add here, for the telling of this story, as directed by George Lucas. George Lucas is the director. George Lucas is the writer. This is all George. Attack of the Clones, I'll grant some alterations possibly made to some of the characters, possibly bringing in Jar Jar Binks a little bit, maybe due to fan backlash. I'll grant you that. Might have been some changes there. But Attack of the Clones is written and directed by George Lucas. In my opinion, George tells us a story unlike any other Star Wars movie we've ever seen. And now we have this element where we have clones introduced. And this is more of a sci-fi theme that we've seen in any Star Wars movie. As usually in most of the Star Wars movies, it's pretty much a grounded reality, but there's not a whole lot of sci-fi to it. As you understand the difference between sci-fi and this kind of a space fantasy type of world here. But suddenly now we see this world where they're using technology to clone people, and they're cloning, they're taking a way to create these clones of people. And one of these clones that we know of are people and possibly other creatures and races. But what they've done is they have created this army of clones out of this battlehead named Jango Fett, who then has a clone of himself that he raises as his son, who then later becomes Boba Fett, as we meet in the original trilogy, in Return of the Jedi. But this cloning technology, and then of course Obi-Wan goes to this planet after having found the location of it, and of course he meets his friend, longtime buddy, we assume, Dex at the diner. And let's talk about Dex for a second, the direction on this guy. And very much a CGI character, and the whole diner is a practical set. The outside of the diner is a full scale. It's a smaller scale, of course, but it's a full practical miniature set. This whole city there on Coruscant, where they're going to eat at the diner, the establishing shot at Dex's diner there, Dexter Jester. And then he goes inside there, and all of that's a practical set. And along comes his buddy, and he tells him, well, what you got here is one of these Camino darts here. And those Caminos are cloners. Right, this guy's a real weirdo. Another reason I know George Lucas put a lot of time and care into this is because he wanted to make these characters look like certain characters from certain time periods, ideas that he grew up with, and movies that he loved growing up with as a kid. And one of this is the ode to the 50s diner. And so, yeah, you might not have liked it. Kind of really geeky. And also, it just shows that George Lucas is a really sentimental guy. He loves making movies. He loves creating art. He painted this picture with passion. And if you didn't like it, fine. And if you did love it, great. But to say that he's a bad director is simply because you didn't like the choices he made. Come on. All this stuff, man, he did on purpose. He did it with care, meticulously. Nothing's done by accident. There's no way you can argue George Lucas has made these movies and they're bad movies. He made these movies with bad faith. They're bad movies. It was a money scam. Come on. George Lucas, written and directed by, executive produced by. Come on, man. George Lucas, by any standard, is a good director. By the standard of the prequels, I dare say, a great director. This is some of the greatest cinema we've ever had, and some of the greatest cinema I dare say we will ever have. We were lucky, those of us, to be able to see these movies in theaters. Episodes 1, 2, and 3. Attack the Clones, an all-time epic masterpiece. We see Anakin Skywalker as a teenager as he begins to feel his passion for and express his love for Padme Amidala. and who is now at this time a senator, was the queen in episode 1. And as he yearns for her in both physical passion and a soulful romance, and we see this, and George masterfully portrays this on the screen, and Hayden Christensen plays Anakin Skywalker down to a T, masterfully, perfectly, as he torn against his desire for Padme. Both is just, I mean, hey, let's keep it real here, man. George has written a teenager here, just literally on fire in every way you can imagine, and I'll leave it at that. This movie's rated at least PG for a reason. Come on. But the things that George decided to put in the movie and the directorial choices that he made, brilliant, perfect for the telling of the story. All the CGI that he used, it was there. He used it. It was to be done to tell the story. He wanted it to look a certain way. He wanted the story to be told at a certain scale. I think it's beautiful. I think it's fantastic. And if you didn't like it, great. But to say that the prequels are bad movies, or George Lucas is a bad director because you didn't like the choices he made to tell his movies the way he told them, which he told perfectly and beautifully perfectly, I might add. Of course, they're not perfect movies. That's not what I mean to say. I mean to say he told them perfectly. He wanted them this way, in other words. They are what he wanted perfectly. Now, I'm sure he might say he wanted some more changes. But you get the idea. Nothing's perfect, but I'll leave it at that. Yeah, there was a lot of CGI in Attack of the Clones, sure, but some of the most advancement of the characters and storytelling takes place too. And you gotta have this CGI. And of course, a lot of it looks weird by today's standards. It looks like CGI. But to say he's a bad director and the prequels are bad movies, come on. It's a movie to tell a story, and if you didn't like it, great. But to say that effort wasn't put into it, or the quality's bad, that's just not what it is. Attack of the Clones is an epic masterpiece, and made in a part of a story that is one of the epic masterpiece stories of our time and any generation. Written and directed by one of the greatest creators ever. So if you didn't like it, great. But to say it's bad, come on. Okay, moving on to Revenge of the Sith. We're just glossing over this stuff because we don't have all day. Here we see Anakin Skywalker as a fully developed military hero and a pilot in the galaxy, spanning the galaxy here. This war that's now going on, it's a civil war, as the Republic is being torn in two. And then here we're introduced more deeply to the world of the dark side of the Force, even though, of course, as we've already indicated and noted, the Attack of the Clones, Anakin, we see his turn in one of the most horrific ways. As his mother dies there, and he goes to save his mother, to find his mother, only to find her die. She dies in his arms, and he slaughters all of the Sand People, including the women and the children. And George makes a very clever choice to show us children playing more than once, and what we assume to be women and men playing and watching children and having somewhat of a domestic setting. Very purposely he showed us this, and then to show that now Anakin was a murderer, even as in Attack of the Clones. So by the time we get to Revenge of the Sith, we know that he's a military hero, but we also know that he's committed murder at least once. But he did confess this murder to Padme Amidala, and she knows this too. And as George is telling us this story and these episodes within this story and these stories within this story, if you will, he's making these choices. And in this particular movie, Revenge of the Sith, we open up and we see that Anakin has a scar I'm not looking at it, but his scar is now a sign of his having participated in these wars. So we know that in addition to having gone into the dark side and committing murder, he has now, as part of his psyche, whatever horrors or trauma, if you will put it that way, though the participation in the actions of this war is left upon his mind. And this is something that George does tell in a very family-friendly way, if you will, without dismissing it outright. A lot of stuff it's not a lot of gore, so to speak, but George makes it real that this is a war that is going on, that is resulting in real life being lost and real tragedy in terms of stakes for life and liberty and the fall of the Republic. But the real story he's telling is the futility of war, should I say. I don't want to get too much into that because again, you can read all about it in the books. These are some deeper dives here that we're taking, the themes that George is following in regards to his philosophy and how he tries to put certain ideas into his stories that don't seem to be force-fed to the audience, but yet they're always in his stories about bringing peace to the world. But this getting sidetracked there, you can read all about that in the books and all about the deeper meanings of Star Wars episodes 1, 2, and 3. But we see the politics of this world, and we see how this leads to war, and we see the futility of it all, because it's only to sustain power and sustain those in power. And George shows us this, both in imagery and music, and then as well in writing. And here we see Order 66, where upon this order, why the number 6 and 6, I do not know. But nonetheless, the order is executed in such a way as to really pull on my heartstrings. I mean, I really felt it, man. And I remember when I watched this movie in the theaters, I did just like Yoda did when he just dropped his cane and put his hand on his chest. I just couldn't believe it. And just talking about it now, I'm doing that right now. Order 66 is one of the most memorable, to put it mildly, scenes in movie history and cinema history. I'll also leave it at that. So, in the end, we see Anakin go fully into the dark side as he, in order to save Padme, betrays his very oath to the Jedi Order and becomes an enemy of the Jedi, even murdering younglings, which we've already seen him do. We saw him do it in episode 2, beautifully told by George. A horrible story, beautifully told. And now here we see him doing it. He's fully turned to the dark side. And then it's a duel to the death on Mustafar between Anakin Skywalker, the student, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, the teacher. And George Lucas tells us this story, and it's beautiful. And I'll tell you, it's the special effects, the set, and you just watch that scene there. It's about a minute long. I saw a video on it. It was a documentary. I think it was called How Much Work Goes Into Making 1 Minute of Star Wars. That's a fantastic scene. But I do think that, of course, Duel of the Fates is unmatched as one of the all-time, no, never mind one of the all-time. It's the all-time best lightsaber battle in the Star Wars movies, period, over and out. Duel of the Fates. Unmatched. But Anakin fully turns to the dark side in Revenge of the Sith, and then, of course, tragically ends up contributing to I say, you might say, killing Padme, his wife, as he force chokes her, and then later she dies while giving birth to her two children, twins, and she names them Luke and Leia. And all of this was seen in dreams, and this was told by the storyteller, by George. It was told to us. And as we looked at these images and saw these images, we were seeing what Anakin was seeing. And now here we're seeing it come to pass. And this is how George is telling us the story. Through dreams that Anakin is having, and the secret meetings that he and Padme are having in public because they can't be seen because they're not supposed to be married. It's a lot of pressure on this character, Anakin, and he's making it worse for himself by refusing help from his friends. Is it somewhat clunky? Yes. Is it pretty deep in the expositional dialogue? Quite a bit. But is it ever boring? No. It is the feeling of it, the sense that there's an urgency here, a movement, and that you care about the characters. I'm absolutely 100% all in, all invested. I'm reading this, I'm seeing it. The opera scene with Anakin and the Chancellor. It just, Order 66, Anakin going full to the dark side. Even the last final greeting between Obi-Wan and Anakin, as they both say to each other, "May the Force be with you." And this would be the last time they would meet as friends. And then, of course, we see them in episode 4. But we are seeing them for the first time, as I did in episode 4, as Vader introduces himself to me as the teacher is now the master, the student has now become the teacher, and so on and so forth. But now I see where that character is actually the student, and he is now battling to the death his teacher. And in this battle, he loses. And we see how Anakin Skywalker is turned into Darth Vader, and how he becomes Darth Vader. And we learn this whole story of Anakin Skywalker, the pilot, the great pilot, and the warrior, an ally, and a friend. We see this, but now we also see the love and the tragedy. And we know now what Anakin went through as he's laying there, looking up at his son, Luke, in Return of the Jedi. And he tells him, "Take off this mask. I want to look at you with my own eyes." And then Luke tells him, "No, if I do, you'll die." And Darth Vader, Anakin, at this point says, "That nothing can stop that now. I want to look at you with my own eyes." So he takes the mask off, the hood off, and he says, to tell Luke, he tells Luke, he says, "Tell your sister you were right. Tell her, sister, tell her you were right." And then he dies. It's one of the most beautiful scenes in movie history, not to mention literature history. As the screenplay is literature. It's an all-time epic story, and of course I didn't quote it exactly, but you get the idea. But the reason that has so much resonance is because we see episodes 1 through 3, and we meet Anakin as he's a little boy at age 10. And so we see him grow up as a teenager, we see him fall in love, and we see him murder kids. And then we also see him nearly murder his own wife. And then be turned into a cyborg monster. It's a real tragedy. It's a terrible, terrible tragedy, told beautifully, and I would say nearly perfectly, by George Lucas. The best that could be accomplished in our time with the technology that we have available, within the budgets that we have. To be realistic, of course, there's always a way to do it perfectly according to your point of view, according to your position. It didn't have to be all CGI and attack the clones for the battle on Geonosis. Well, of course it did, according to the scale that George wanted. I mean, a lot of people would have gladly made their own suits, went out there and volunteered to do it just to shoot a scene in the Star Wars movie. That's not what George wanted. George wanted the scene to look a certain way. He wanted to tell a story a certain way. He wanted a certain time restraint. He had a certain budget. He chose to go with CGI. Fine, get over it. It doesn't mean it's a bad movie. By any objective, it's a good movie. Now, I did use that term on purpose. So by an objective point of view, it's a good movie. By a subjective point of view, maybe not. But objectively, come on, there's no way you can say that Star Wars Episode 1, Star Wars Episode 2, or Star Wars Episode 3 is a bad movie. No way, by any objective. They're great movies, by any objective. Rather, great movies, I would say, they're made nearly perfectly by the director. Each of them is that movie. And that is, in the whole trilogy, I would say it's great. And I would say each one of those movies is a great movie. And I would say the prequels is better than the original trilogy. And the prequels make the original trilogy better. And that's what I have to say about, is George Lucas a good director based on the prequels? The answer is yes. George is a great director based on the prequels. And are the prequels good? Yes, they're great. And what do I think about the prequels? The prequels are fantastic. 10 out of 10, baby. All-time epic masterpiece. Written and directed by George Lucas. Produced by George Lucas. Rather, produced by Rick McCallum. Executive produced by George Lucas. The Phantom Menace. Attack of the Clones. Revenge of the Sith. Epic masterpiece trilogy. And that's all the time we have for today, dear friends. Until we meet again, remember, your focus determines your reality. May the Force be with us.
He is the chosen one. You must see it. You must see it.